what I'll do is showcase how I plant my tomatoes, and hopefully, you pick up a few tips along the way. Oh, it's a blowy day today. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully the wind doesn't play too much havoc. It's Father's Day here, which is a bit ironic how I'll hear today, leave him alone, it's Father's Day. Because that wouldn't happen if I didn't have kids. Anyway, during the week, first of spring, like 1st of September, first day of spring, and up here where I live, I can start planting tomatoes. I can actually plant tomatoes all year round. I had some tomato seedlings that I've been growing, and they're ready to go in the ground. And I wanted to showcase how I plant them, and I wanted to talk a little bit about tomatoes, because tomatoes typically are the gateway plant. It is the plant that brings most people into growing their own food. I remember I just moved out of home, and I invited my nonno, and it happened to be a Sunday that he rocked up, and I was out in the garden because I couldn't remember. Clearly I remember him actually trying to park his car. He wasn't the best of drivers. God love his soul. Anyway, I heard him park the car because I was outside just tidying up a little bit. And he came through the gate and he noticed that I was in the garden, and he said, "Oh, do you like to garden?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Guess what? I've got some tomato seedlings. I'll bring some throughout the week." And he came to my house the next weekend with this ice cream tub. In it had these tomato seedlings all wrapped up in newspaper, kept nice and damp. And it was from that point onwards, those tomato plants have sent me on my life journey in many ways. I'm here talking about growing tomatoes, all because of that particular moment. I like to sink my tomatoes, and what I mean by that is plant them deeper than the actual ground level in terms of what they are in the pot. Some people will say it's a waste of time, it makes no difference. Really, that's the joy of gardening. There are no rules, and this works for me, and so that's what I do. I like to do it mainly because it encourages the roots to be deeper to begin with, and because we're quite warm here, it means they don't dry out as much and I don't need as much water. Some people will say, well, just mulch in that case. Well, I don't like to mulch my beds up here so much because a couple reasons is that if we get heavy rains, and we can, the mulch gets really sodden, or in the other case where the rainfall that we might get doesn't actually penetrate into the soil. Ultimately what happens anyway is that once the plant becomes established anyway, it tends to send out most of the root growth towards the surface anyway. But in the meantime, I find it works. This stuff that I've got in here has got to come out. I've been slowly harvesting it, but you can see here, got some carrots, but the rest of these can come out now. I've prepped these beds, and now what I've done, I had carrots, I had lettuce in this bed previously. I've just ripped them out. I haven't turned over the bed, I've just put in some pelletised fertiliser and then followed up with some top dressing of compost. I haven't turned it over so much. Now I want to give my tomatoes some food, but I don't want to give it too much, because what happens is any fruiting plant actually, if you give it too much nitrogen, it won't put out fruit because it's really happy and it's content. So it's a matter of getting that balance right. I have a lot of customers and clients go, "Oh, I've planted my tomatoes, they're really bushy, they look beautiful, but I've got no tomatoes." And the reason being is quite often is that you've over-fertilised it. A plant will only want to reproduce itself if it's slightly stressed. So what I'll do is showcase how I plant my tomatoes. I'm using hardwood stakes. The reason why I put the stakes in is I've been able to measure out where I'm planting my tomatoes, but also I'm not doing any damage to the plant. If I plant them and then put the stake in down the track, I might actually damage the roots, but it also gives the plant plenty of support throughout the early growing stages. I'm gonna sink it, and what I mean sinking your tomatoes, and you'll hear people say sinking your tomatoes. I'm going to plant it all the way up until those first leaves. What essentially I don't want to do is touch any of these hairs, if I can. And by planting that little bit deeper, it's going to actually give it more support, but also it's going to end up putting out more roots along the stem there. Make a nice deepish hole. Okay, I'm going to grab this plant, try and hold it by this leaves up the top. It should come. There we go. So it's deeper. It's not at the level. It's like probably about 2-3 inches, maybe 8 centimeters below. And I just backfill. Okay. So there we have it. I've sunk the tomatoes, I've just planted them. Next step is I'm just going to use some worm castings and just sprinkle a little bit around each of the plants. This is a new garden for me, so my worm farm hasn't quite got up to speed. So therefore, yeah, you can actually purchase worm castings. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit around each of the plants, like so. And that essentially, all I'm doing is inoculating the soil with good bacteria and microorganisms that is in the worm castings. I'm just watering in with some seaweed, concentrated seaweed. Get it in a powdered form from your local nursery. It just helps settle these young seedlings in. It's not a fertilizer, again, it's a soil conditioner. Give it a good drench. Next, I would allow the plant to grow a little bit before we actually start to tie them up and pinch them out. And I'll do another update on pinching out tomatoes, and I'll report back how these tomatoes go in a couple months. So that's the next steps. Watch this space. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Hope you're out in the garden. Stay hungry.
Castle on the borderline is surely like this. Approaching of a UMC is purely hypeness. So I mention it again and again. It's not